You have no idea who you're humiliating. Those were the only 5 words I said. The crystal chandeliers shimmered above us, the clink of champagne glasses and murmurs of celebration suddenly silenced by my voice. Diana Caldwell, the CEO, paused mid-toast, her flute frozen in the air. Dozens of suits and evening gowns turned their heads in our direction. And there I stood, in my best black dress, hand on Caleb Foster's trembling shoulder as he stared at the ground, still processing the fact that he had been intentionally excluded from his own team's award dinner. His name hadn't been on the seating chart. His achievements hadn't been mentioned in the slideshow. While the director, Douglas Barrett, basked in stolen credit, my colleague stood alone outside, in the cold, without even a chair at the table. So I walked in with him, and said those 5 words. And when Diana's eyes met mine, and then fell on Caleb, her face turned white, because she recognized him. And just like that, the entire story began to unravel. I've always been the type to keep my head down. Results speak for themselves, my father used to say. As a senior operations coordinator at Meridian Equity, partners in San Francisco, that philosophy had served me well for nearly a decade. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I was just Vanessa Cole. Reliable, thorough, invisible. The 45th floor had become my second home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the bay that most people would kill for. But after thousands of late nights, it was just wallpaper to me. The polished marble, floors, the sleek glass offices, the expensive artwork, all of it designed to impress clients and intimidate employees. It worked. "Morning, Vanessa," said Mia from reception, sliding me a latte without my having to ask. Douglas called an emergency meeting. Conference room A, 10 minutes. I sighed, knowing exactly what that meant. Another fire to put out. Another impossible deadline. Another opportunity for Douglas Barrett to stand at the head of the table and delegate the impossible to everyone else. "Thanks," I said, taking the coffee. "Any idea what fresh hell we're walking into?" Mia leaned forward. "The Westfield account. They're threatening to pull out." My stomach dropped. Westfield represented almost 20% of our annual revenue. Losing them would mean layoffs, restructuring, chaos. When I reached the conference room, most of the team was already there. Nervous energy filled the air as everyone scrolled through their phones, avoiding eye contact. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak. At the far end of the table sat Caleb Foster, quietly reviewing a stack of reports. He joined the firm 2 years ago. Brilliant, methodical, kind. The sort of colleague who remembered everyone's birthday and stayed late to help without being asked. Caleb looked up as I entered, offering a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," he said, sliding a folder my way. I pulled the numbers from the last quarter. Thought it might help. I glanced at the papers. He'd already highlighted the potential problem areas and noted possible solutions in the margins. Of course he had. "Thanks, Caleb. You're a lifesaver." The door swung open, and Douglas Barrett strode in. At 45, Douglas had mastered the art of corporate theatrics. His tailored suits, his carefully maintained salt and pepper hair, his Rolex watch. Everything about him screamed success. But those of us who worked closely with him knew the truth. Douglas was all smoke, no fire. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, clapping his hands together, "we have a situation." For the next 15 minutes, Douglas outlined the Westfield crisis in dramatic detail. Their CFO was unhappy with our recent performance. They were considering other firms. We had exactly 1 week to turn things around. "I need solutions," Douglas said, pacing the room. "I need brilliance. I need someone to save us from disaster." Across the table, Caleb cleared his throat. "I've been looking at their portfolio, and I think I see the issue. Their risk exposure in emerging markets has increased by 17%, but we haven't adjusted our strategy accordingly." Douglas barely glanced his way. "Yes, well, that's part of it. If I may," Caleb continued, sliding a spreadsheet to the center of the table. "I've modeled a restructuring that would reduce their exposure while maintaining projected returns. We'd need to reallocate approximately 30% of their assets, but the simulations show it would stabilize within—" "That sounds complicated," Douglas interrupted, "and time-consuming. We need something immediate." I watched Caleb's face fall as Douglas dismissed his idea without even looking at it. This wasn't the first time. In the 2 years since Caleb had joined our team, I'd noticed a pattern. Douglas consistently ignored or minimized Caleb's contributions. only to mysteriously present similar ideas days later as his own. The meeting dragged on for another hour, with various team members offering suggestions that Douglas shot down one by one. By the end, we had no clear plan, just a series of urgent tasks divided among the team. As everyone filed out, Douglas called after us. "Oh, and don't forget, the leadership gala is next Friday. The CEO will be there, along with the entire executive team. This is our chance to shine." I lingered behind, waiting until the room emptied. Caleb was still at the table, gathering his papers. "Your restructuring plan," I said quietly. "It's good, really good," he shrugged. "Doesn't matter if no one sees it." I could talk to Douglas, make him take a second look. Caleb shook his head. "Don't bother. We both know how that would end." He paused, hesitating. "Actually, I was hoping to discuss something with you. I've been thinking about applying for the associate director position, the one that's opening next month." I felt a surge of hope for him. "You should. Your work on the Henderson Recovery Project alone qualifies you. You saved the company, what, $8 million? 8.3, he corrected with a small smile. "But I'd need Douglas's recommendation, and we both know that's not going to happen." Something about the resignation in his voice bothered me deeply. I'd spent my career keeping my head down, avoiding conflict, playing the game. But watching Caleb, watching his brilliance being systematically erased, had begun to stir something uncomfortable in me. "Maybe it's time we stopped accepting that," I said, surprising myself. Caleb looked at me, curious. "What do you mean?" But before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Douglas. "My office. Now." "Nothing," I said, gathering my things. "Just thinking out loud. Let's talk later?" As I walked to Douglas's office, I couldn't shake the image of Caleb's face, the quiet resignation, the acceptance of unfairness as simply the way things were. I'd been in this industry long enough to know how it worked. The loudest voices got the credit. The most political players got the promotions. The system wasn't designed for people like Caleb, or people like me. But something was shifting inside me. A quiet voice that had been silent for too long was beginning to whisper that maybe, just maybe, it was time to speak up. I just had no idea then how far things would go, or that in 1 week's time, I would stand in a room full of executives and say 5 words that would change everything. Douglas's office occupied the corner of the building, with 2 glass walls overlooking the San Francisco skyline. He sat behind his massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing for me to sit. I perched on the edge of a leather chair, waiting as he finished his call. "Vanessa," he said finally, setting down his phone. "We need to talk about the Westfield situation." "I thought we just did, in the meeting." He leaned forward. "That was for the team. This is different. I need you to pull together a complete restructuring plan by Monday." I blinked. "Monday? That's 3 days. And didn't you just shoot down Caleb's restructuring idea?" Douglas waved his hand dismissively. "Foster's approach was too conservative. I need something bold, something that will impress Diana at the gala." "The gala isn't until Friday. If we're presenting to Westfield on Monday." "We're not," he interrupted. "I am, and I need your help putting together something that will look good when I present it to the executive team at the gala." The realization hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't about saving the Westfield account. This was about Douglas positioning himself for praise at the gala, using our work as his stepping stone. What about Caleb's model? He's already done most of the groundwork. Douglas's expression hardened. "What is it with you and Foster? If his work was that valuable, I'd use it. But it's not." I bit my tongue, nodding. "Fine. I'll have something for you by Monday." "That's why you're my right hand, Vanessa. You get things done." He smiled, already returning to his computer screen. "Oh, and check with HR about the gala. Seating arrangements. I want our key performers at the main table." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from the HR director, with the subject line, "Leadership Gala, Final Attendance List." I opened it, scanning the names, and felt my heart sink. Caleb Foster wasn't on it. I immediately forwarded the email to him with a note. "Did you RSVP for the gala?" His response came, seconds later, 3 weeks ago, confirmed twice. Something wasn't right. I headed to the HR department on the 43rd floor, where Monica Chen, the director, was typing rapidly at her desk. "Vanessa?" she said without looking up. "What can I do for you?" "The gala list. I noticed Caleb Foster isn't on it." Monica finally glanced up. "That's correct. There must be a mistake. He RSVP'd weeks, Ego. She pulled up a document on her screen. According to our records, Mr. Foster's invitation was rescinded at the request of department leadership. Douglas Barrett specifically asked that we limit attendance to essential contributors. The words landed like a slap. Essential contributors? Caleb saved the Henderson account single-handedly. He's developed models that have increased our efficiency by 20%. How is he not essential? Monica's expression remained neutral. I don't make these decisions, Vanessa. I just implement them. If you have concerns about department representation, you should speak with Douglas. I will, I said, turning to leave. Then I paused. Monica, has Caleb filed any complaints? About recognition or credit for his work? Her fingers stopped, typing. You know I can't discuss personnel matters. That's a yes then. She sighed. Vanessa, some advice? Be careful about inserting yourself into situations that don't concern you. It's not good for team cohesion. I returned to my desk, anger simmering beneath my professional veneer. Over the next few days, I watched Caleb more closely. He arrived later than usual, spoke less in meetings. His usual enthusiasm seemed dimmed, replaced by a mechanical efficiency that broke my heart to witness. Thursday morning, 2 days before the gala, Douglas called another team meeting. This time, his energy was different, triumphant, almost giddy. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, I have amazing news. The restructuring plan for Westfield has been approved. The CFO called personally to thank me for my innovative approach. My head snapped up. The restructuring plan? My restructuring plan that I'd submitted to him just yesterday? Or worse, was it actually Caleb's plan that Douglas had initially dismissed? Furthermore, Douglas continued, in recognition of the leadership I've demonstrated during this crisis, I've been offered the senior director position, effective immediately. Macchiao. Room broke into polite applause. Everyone except Caleb and me. Across the table, Caleb's face had gone completely blank, a carefully constructed mask that revealed nothing. But I could see his hands beneath the table, clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The senior director position, the exact role Caleb had hoped to apply for. We'll be celebrating this achievement, along with several others, at tomorrow's gala, Douglas continued. I expect everyone to be there, looking their best. This is a huge win for our team. After the meeting, I tried to catch Caleb, but he disappeared immediately. I sent him a text. Can we talk? No response. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caleb's face during Douglas's announcement, about how systematically he had been erased from the company's success story, about how easy it was for someone like Douglas to climb higher by standing on the shoulders of quieter, more brilliant people. By morning, I'd made a decision. I pulled out the black dress I reserved for special occasions, sleek, professional, but with just enough edge to make a statement. The leadership gala wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was a battlefield, and for once in my career, I wasn't going to keep my head down. As I applied my lipstick, my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Not feeling well. Won't make it tonight. Sorry. I stared at the message, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. He wasn't sick. He'd been excluded, deliberately, cruelly, and now he was excluding himself. Not on my watch. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, dialing his number as I went. When he didn't answer, I sent a simple text. I'm coming to get you. Be ready by 7. The St. Francis Hotel gleamed like a jewel in the heart of downtown San Francisco. Limousines lined the circular drive, disgorging executives in tuxedos and designers' gowns. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white-clothed tables adorned with centerpieces of calla lilies and orchids. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I arrived alone, my Uber dropping me at the entrance. The doorman nodded respectfully as I handed over my invitation, my black dress simple but elegant against the backdrop of excess. Ms. Cole, the hostess greeted me, consulting her tablet. You're at table 3 with the operations team. I scanned the room, taking in the careful arrangement of power. Table 1, directly in front of the stage, seated Diana Caldwell and the executive team. Table 2 held the board members and their spouses. And there, at table 3, sat Douglas Barrett, already holding court among our colleagues, his new senior director title practically radiating from him like a crown. I approached slowly, counting chairs. 8 place settings, 8 names, none of them Caleb's. Vanessa, Douglas called, raising his champagne flute. Just in time. Diana's about to begin her welcome speech. I didn't sit. Where's Caleb's seat? Douglas's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Foster? He's not feeling well, I heard. That's interesting because I spoke with him earlier. He said he wasn't invited. A ripple of discomfort passed around the table. My colleagues suddenly found their napkins fascinating. There must be some confusion, Douglas said smoothly. We had limited seating. Only team members who contributed directly to the Westfield success were included. Contributed directly? My voice remained quiet, but I felt something dangerous building inside me. Caleb created the original restructuring model, the one you rejected in the meeting, then mysteriously adopted days later. The table fell silent. Douglas's smile hardened. Vanessa, this isn't the time or place. You're right, I interrupted, backing away. I'm going to find Caleb. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, ignoring Douglas's hissed command to return. In the lobby, I pulled out my phone and called. Caleb again. Still no answer. I sent another text. I'm at the gala. Where are you? 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Outside. Parking lot. Don't worry about it. I hurried through the hotel's revolving doors and scanned the valet area. There, leaning against a concrete pillar, stood Caleb. He wore a dark blue suit, clearly new, with a silver tie that caught the light from the hotel entrance. In his hand, he clutched a folded piece of paper. His name badge, I realized. The one he'd printed out before discovering he hadn't actually been invited. Caleb, I called, rushing toward him. He straightened, embarrassment washing over his face. Vanessa, go back inside. It's fine. It's not fine. None of this is fine. I gestured toward the ballroom. Douglas took credit for your work. He used it to get promoted. And now he's in there celebrating while you're standing out here in the cold? Caleb's shoulders sagged. It's how the game works. I've known that from day one. It doesn't have to be, I insisted. Come inside with me, right now. He shook his head. I don't have an invitation. They won't let me in. You're coming in as my guest. I took his arm. Douglas can't stop you from attending a company function. Vanessa, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but no buts. I tightened my grip on his arm. For 2 years, I've watched Douglas steal your ideas. I've watched HR ignore your complaints. I've watched you shrink yourself to make room for his ego, and I'm done watching. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. A tiny spark of the brilliance that had been systematically dimmed over months of mistreatment. What's your plan? He asked quietly. First, we walk in together. Then we find Diana Caldwell. The CEO? Why would she care about this? I pulled him toward the entrance. Because she should, and if she doesn't, we'll make her care. The hostess raised an eyebrow as we re-entered, but I sailed past her without explanation. Caleb's arm linked firmly with mine. Inside the ballroom, Diana had just taken the stage, her silver gown catching the light as she approached the microphone. Distinguished colleagues, she began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. Tonight we celebrate excellence. Tonight we honor those who have demonstrated extraordinary leadership and vision. I guided Caleb toward the front of the room, feeling the weight of stairs as we moved between tables. Douglas spotted us, his face darkening with alarm. And I'd like to begin by recognizing the outstanding work of our operations team, Diana continued, raising her champagne flute. Particularly Douglas Barrett, whose innovative restructuring of the Westfield account saved us from what could have been a significant loss. Caleb stiffened beside me. I squeezed his arm gently. Douglas, would you stand and be recognized? Diana asked, gesturing toward our table. Douglas rose, beaming with false modesty as applause filled the room, and that's when I saw it. The display screen behind Diana, cycling through images of leadership excellence. There was Douglas, his name emblazoned beneath his photograph with the caption, saved $8.3 million through innovative portfolio restructuring. The exact amount Caleb had saved. The exact strategy Caleb had developed. Diana raised her glass higher. To Douglas Barrett, and to all who exemplify the values of Meridian Equity Partners. The room erupted in applause again. Glasses clinked, and something inside me finally snapped. Wait, I said, my voice cutting through the celebration. Not shouting, just clear and firm. The room didn't fall silent immediately. It happened in waves, starting with those nearest to us, then spreading outward until even the string quartet trailed off into awkward silence. Diana lowered her glass, confused. Yes? Is there something? I kept my hand on Caleb's shoulder, feeling him tremble slightly beneath my touch. Before you continue, there's something you should know. Douglas was moving toward us now, his face a mask of controlled panic. Vanessa, this is inappropriate. I ignored him, my eyes locked with Diana's. You have no idea who you're humiliating. 5 words. Simple, direct. But in that moment, they landed like a bomb. Diana's confusion shifted to alarm. Her eyes moved from me to Caleb, narrowing slightly as she took in his face. And then, something extraordinary happened. Recognition dawned in her expression, followed immediately by shock. Mr. Foster? She said, her voice suddenly uncertain. Beside me, Caleb straightened his shoulders. Yes, Ms. Caldwell. The room had gone completely still. Every eye moved between Diana, Caleb, and Douglas, who had frozen mid-step, his face draining of color. Elliot Foster's son? Diana. Clarified, her champagne flute now forgotten in her hand. Caleb nodded once. Diana set her glass down carefully on the podium. I wasn't aware you worked for Meridian. 2 years now, Caleb replied quietly, though apparently not important enough to be included in tonight's celebration. Diana's gaze hardened as it shifted to Douglas. Mr. Barrett, would you care to explain why Elliot Foster's son, a member of your team, wasn't invited to our leadership gala? Douglas stammered. There was a misunderstanding with the invitations. And why? Diana continued, her voice growing colder. Am I just now learning that he works for us? The silence that followed was deafening. Diana Caldwell stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she approached. Us. The room remained frozen, 200 people collectively holding their breath. Mr. Foster, she said, extending her hand to Caleb, it seems we have a great deal to discuss. Would you and Ms. Cole join me for a moment? Douglas lurched forward. Diana, I can explain. Diana's gaze cut to him like a blade. Not now, Douglas. She turned back to us. Shall we? The Sausalito room should be empty. As we followed Diana out of the ballroom, I caught a glimpse of Douglas's face, a mixture of rage and fear that sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Sausalito room was a small conference space off the main hallway, with a view of the bay, and the bridge lights twinkling in the distance. Diana closed the door behind us and turned, her professional mask, momentarily slipping to reveal genuine concern. Caleb, she said, I owe you an apology. Your father was my mentor when I started in this industry. His letter of recommendation is the reason I got my first job at Morgan Stanley. Caleb nodded. He mentioned you often, said you were the most promising analyst he'd ever worked with. Diana smiled briefly, then her expression grew serious again. Which makes it all the more inexcusable that I didn't know you were working here. How long have you been on Douglas's team? 2 years, I answered, when Caleb hesitated. And in that time, he's saved the company millions through his analysis and portfolio restructuring. The Westfield account that Douglas just took credit for, that was Caleb's model. The Henderson recovery project from last quarter? Also Caleb's work. Diana's eyes narrowed. Do you have documentation of this? I hesitated, then reached into my clutch purse and pulled out a small USB drive. Everything's here. Emails, original models, timestamps showing when Caleb presented ideas and when Douglas later claimed them as his own. Caleb looked at me in surprise. You kept records? I started 6 months ago. I admitted, when I realized what was happening. Diana took the drive, her expression unreadable. This is a serious accusation. It's the truth, I said firmly. And it's been happening in plain sight. Check the HR records. Caleb filed complaints. They were buried. Diana sighed deeply, looking suddenly tired beneath her polished exterior. I believe you. And I'm sorry, Caleb. This isn't how Meridian is supposed to operate. What happens now? Caleb asked quietly. Now, Diana said, straightening her shoulders. We return to the gala. I have an announcement to make. We followed her back to the ballroom, where conversations had resumed in our absence, though tension still hung in the air. Douglas stood with a group of executives, gesturing animatedly, no doubt trying to spin the situation. Diana reclaimed the podium, tapping the microphone to regain the room's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. There's been a misunderstanding that needs to be corrected. The room quieted again as Diana gestured for Caleb to join her on stage. He hesitated, then moved forward, his steps measured and dignified, despite the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. I'd like to introduce you all to Caleb Foster, Diana continued. Many of you may recognize his last name. His father, Elliot Foster, was a legend in our industry and a personal mentor to me. Caleb has been with Meridian for 2 years, though somehow his contributions have gone largely unrecognized. She turned to face the screen behind her, now displaying Douglas's accomplishments, including this one, the Westfield restructuring that saved our company $8.3 million. That was Caleb's work. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Douglas pushed forward. Diana, this is inappropriate. We can discuss personnel matters privately. No, Douglas, Diana cut him off. We've had enough privacy, enough closed doors. From now on, credit goes where credit is due. She turned back to the audience. Effective immediately, I'm initiating a full audit of project attributions within the operations department. And until that audit is complete, Mr. Barrett is being placed on administrative leave. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Douglas's face contorted with rage. This is outrageous. You can't. I can, Diana interrupted coldly. And I have. Security will escort you out. 2 men in dark suits materialized beside Douglas, their expressions professionally blank as they gestured toward the exit. For a moment, I thought Douglas might resist. Instead, he straightened his tie, shot me a look of pure venom, and walked out without another word. Diana turned back to Caleb. Mr. Foster, I believe congratulations are in order. The associate director position is yours if you want it. Caleb blinked, clearly overwhelmed. Thank you. Yes. Diana nodded, then addressed the room once more. Now, let's continue our celebration, this time honoring the right people. As the evening resumed, colleagues who had ignored Caleb for months suddenly discovered an urgent need to shake his hand, to claim they'd always recognized his talent, to insist they'd had no idea about Douglas's behavior. Through it all, Caleb remained gracious, though I could see the strain behind his smile. I hung back, giving him space to absorb his moment of vindication. But as the night wore on, he found his way back to me, 2 champagne flutes in hand. For you, he said, offering me one. Though it hardly seems enough. I took the glass. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. He studied me, his expression serious. Why did you do it? You risked your job, your reputation? Why? I considered the question, swirling the champagne gently. Because it was right. Because talent and integrity should matter more than politics and self-promotion. Because I was tired of watching good people disappear. Caleb nodded slowly. I was going to quit, you know. Tonight was going to be my last attempt to be seen. If you hadn't come to find me, but I did, I said simply. And here we are. He raised his glass. To speaking up. I clinked my glass against his. To being heard. As the night continued around us, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet certainty that I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I was no longer the person who kept her head down, who let results speak for themselves. I had found my voice, and I wasn't done using it. Monday morning arrived with a strange electricity in the air. I stepped off the elevator onto the 45th floor to find it transformed. Gone was the hushed efficiency, replaced by clusters of whispering colleagues who fell silent as I passed. News travels fast in corporate America, but scandal travels at the speed of light. Mia handed me my latte with wide eyes. Everyone's talking about Friday night, she whispered. Is it true that Douglas was escorted out by security? I accepted the coffee with a nod. It happened. And Caleb? He's really associate director now? That's right. Mia leaned closer. They're saying you're the one who exposed everything, that you've been collecting evidence for months. I took a sip of my coffee, neither confirming nor denying. Shouldn't you be answering phones? She grinned. They can wait. This is the most exciting thing that's happened since the Christmas party incident of 2022. I smiled despite myself. Back to work, Mia. As I headed toward my office, no longer a cubicle, thanks to a hastily arranged weekend shuffle of workspace assignments, I passed Douglas's former corner office. The nameplate had already been removed, the space inside dark and empty. It was surreal how quickly a person could be erased. Vanessa. I turned to find Monica Chen from HR standing behind me, her expression carefully neutral. Diana would like to see you, immediately. My stomach tightened. Despite Diana's public support on Friday, I knew there would be consequences for my actions. Corporations don't reward whistleblowers, no matter how justified. Of course, I said, following Monica to the executive floor. Diana's office was 3 times the size of Douglas's, with views on 3 sides and furnishings that whispered old money rather than shouted new wealth. She sat behind a massive desk of polished walnut, reviewing documents with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Vanessa," she said, looking up as I entered. "Please sit." I perched on the edge of a leather chair, back straight, hands folded in my lap, ready for whatever came next. Diana removed her glasses. "I've spent the weekend reviewing your evidence. It's thorough." "I'm detail-oriented," I said simply. "Indeed." She tapped a folder on her desk. "The audit team has only just begun their investigation, but they've already uncovered additional incidents. It seems Douglas's behavior wasn't limited to Caleb. This didn't surprise me. Bullies rarely have just one target. What troubles me most," Diana continued, "is how long this went unchallenged. Not just by you, though I understand you've only been documenting for 6 months, but by everyone. By the system itself." I chose my words carefully. "The culture rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. People learn quickly what's safe." Diana nodded slowly. "And speaking up isn't safe. Not typically, no." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You took an enormous risk on Friday night. Why?" It was the same question Caleb had asked. I gave Diana the same answer. "Because it was right. Many people know what's right, Vanessa. Few act on it when the personal cost is high." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Diana stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the fog rolling across the bay. "I owe Elliot Foster a great deal, not just for his professional mentorship, but for his ethical guidance. He taught me that integrity isn't a luxury, it's a necessity in this business." She turned back to face me. "I've failed to uphold that standard. I've allowed a culture to develop where people like Douglas thrive, while people like Caleb, and you, are pushed to the margins." "You didn't know," I offered. "I should have known," she corrected sharply. "That's my job. And now I need to fix it." She returned to her desk. "Which is why I'm creating a new position, Director of Ethical Compliance and Employee Advocacy. It will report directly to me." I waited, uncertain where this was going. "I'd like you to take the role," Diana said. "Your first task would be to develop new protocols for project attribution and credit. Your second would be to create a safe channel for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "I don't have a background in ethics or compliance." Diana smiled. "But you have something more important: moral courage. You are willing to risk everything to right a wrong. That's exactly the quality I need in this position." My mind raced. This wasn't at all what I'd expected. I'd been prepared for polite dismissal, for being labeled a troublemaker, for finding my career path suddenly blocked at every turn. Not for promotion, not for power. "I'll need time to think about it," I said finally. "Of course. Take the week." Diana put her glasses back on, a clear signal that our meeting was ending. "Oh, and Vanessa, whatever you decide, thank you for reminding me what Meridian is supposed to stand for." I left Diana's office in a daze, making my way back to the operations floor. As I rounded the corner, I nearly collided with Caleb, now installed in his new office, smaller than Douglas's had been, but with the same corner views. "There you are," he said, gesturing me inside. "I've been looking for you all morning." I entered, taking in the half-unpacked boxes and the nameplate already mounted on the door. "Caleb Foster, Associate Director." "Settling in?" I asked. "Trying to." He ran a hand through his hair, looking both elated and overwhelmed. "It's been a whirlwind. Diana called me over the weekend to discuss transition plans. The team has a million questions. And Douglas—" "What about Douglas?" I asked sharply. Caleb sighed. "He sent me an email. Said this isn't over, that I'll regret stealing his position." My blood ran cold. "You need to forward that to HR immediately. That's textbook intimidation." "Already done." Caleb sat on the edge of his desk. "But that's not why I wanted to see you. I heard Diana offered you a new position." News really did travel fast. Word gets around. "Are you going to take it?" I shrugged. "I don't know. It's a big change." Caleb studied me for a moment. "You know, I always wondered why someone with your talent was content to stay in the background. You're brilliant, Vanessa. You could have been climbing the ladder all these years. I didn't want politics. I just wanted to do good work. And now?" I looked out at the view, the same one I'd seen for nearly a decade, but somehow different today. Now I'm thinking maybe the politics need changing. Caleb smiled. That sounds like a yes. Maybe it is. I turned back to him. What? About you? Ready to be the boss? His smile faded slightly. Honestly, I'm terrified. What if I'm not cut out for leadership? What if I make the same mistakes Douglas did? You won't, I said firmly. How can you be so sure? Because you're asking those questions. Douglas never did. Before Caleb could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the display. It's Diana. I should take this. Nodded, heading for the door. We'll talk later. As I walked back to my office, colleagues nodded or smiled in my direction, some with newfound respect, others with wariness. I'd disrupted the status quo, and everyone was still adjusting to the new reality, including me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. This isn't a victory. It's a declaration of war. Douglas. It had to be. I stared at the message, feeling a flicker of fear that I quickly suppressed. I saved the number and forwarded the text to Monica in HR with a simple note, for the record. Then I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, thinking about Diana's offer. Director of Ethical Compliance and Employee Advocacy. A position with real power to make changes, to protect people like Caleb, to reshape the culture. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I began to type, outlining what such a role might entail, what policies would need changing, what systems would need overhaul. By lunchtime, I had 5 pages of notes and a growing certainty that this was exactly what I was meant to do. The battle with Douglas wasn't over. I knew that. But for the first time in my career, I wasn't afraid of the fight. I was ready for it. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a corporate thriller. Diana announced my new position on Tuesday morning, sparking a flurry of reactions ranging from enthusiastic support to thinly veiled hostility. By Wednesday, I'd received 43 emails from employees wanting to discuss situations they'd experienced. By Friday, that number had doubled. You've opened Pandora's box, Caleb remarked as we shared lunch in his new office, takeout containers spread across his desk. Everyone who's ever felt slighted or silenced is coming to you now. I stabbed at my salad. Good. That's the point. How many are legitimate concerns versus personal grievances? About 70-30, I admitted. But even the personal stuff reveals patterns. There are departments where favoritism is rampant, teams where women and minorities are systematically sidelined, managers who take credit for subordinates' work as a matter of routine. Caleb shook his head. Just like Douglas. Exactly like Douglas. It's cultural. I pushed aside my half-eaten lunch, which is why it's so hard to change. The people with power benefit from the system as it is. Including Diana? I hesitated. I think Diana genuinely wants change, but she's been part of the system for so long, she can't see all its flaws. And you can? I've spent a decade watching from the sidelines. You see different things from there. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. So what's your strategy? Start small, build allies, document everything. I pulled out my notebook. I'm creating a secure reporting system that protects whistleblowers, and I'm drafting a new project attribution policy that requires transparent acknowledgement of all contributors. Douglas would have hated that, Caleb said with a small smile. Douglas isn't here anymore, but his influence lingered. Though officially on administrative leave pending investigation, Douglas had allies throughout the company, people who owed him favors, people who benefited from his approach, people who simply feared change. They weren't openly opposing me, but I could feel their resistance in delayed responses, in suddenly unavailable resources, in hallway conversations that stopped when I approached. And then there were the messages. Never from Douglas directly, but from anonymous numbers or blank email accounts. How? Long before they realize you're the problem? Traitors always get what they deserve. Watching you. I reported each one, but without concrete proof linking them to Douglas, there was little HR could do beyond documenting the harassment. By the 3rd week, the resistance had evolved from passive to active. My proposals were getting lost in administrative loops. Meetings I called were suddenly rescheduled due to conflicts. Resources I requested were delayed due to budget constraints. They're trying to wait you out, Monica told me during one of our now regular check-ins. They think if they stall long enough, the momentum will fade and everything will go back to normal. That's not happening, I said firmly. Monica studied me. No, I don't think it is. But be careful, Vanessa. Douglas made a lot of friends in high places during his time here. Board members, investors, people Diana has to answer to. Are you saying she might withdraw her support? Monica shrugged. I'm saying corporate memory is short, and victories can be temporary. Douglas is counting on that. Her warning stayed with me as I worked late that night, fine-tuning my proposal for the new attribution system. Around 9, my office door opened, and Caleb appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, he said, setting one on my desk. You've been at it for 12 hours straight. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Just trying to get this proposal perfect for tomorrow's executive committee meeting. Caleb settled into the chair across from me. How's it going? Really? I sighed, allowing my professional mask to slip for a moment. It's like pushing a boulder uphill. For every ally I find, there are 3 people working to undermine me, and the messages keep coming. From Douglas? I can't prove it, but who else would be so invested in seeing me fail? Caleb's expression darkened. Have you told Diana? About the obstruction, yes. About the messages. Not everything. She has enough to deal with. The audit of Douglas's conduct is expanding. They've found financial irregularities now. What kind of irregularities? I hesitated. I shouldn't say. It's still under investigation. Caleb nodded, understanding the boundaries. Just be careful. Douglas is vindictive and he's got nothing to lose now. I'm being careful, I promised. But I can't back down. Not when we're so close to making real change. After Caleb left, I worked for another hour, then packed up to head home. The office was mostly empty, just a few lights burning in distant cubicles. As I waited for the elevator, I scrolled through emails on my phone, already planning tomorrow's battles. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. I stepped inside, still focused on my screen, and didn't notice I wasn't alone until a familiar voice spoke. Hello, Vanessa. My head snapped up. Douglas Barrett stood in the corner of the elevator, immaculately dressed as always, but with something different in his eyes, a cold, hard glint that sent a chill down my spine. Douglas, I managed, backing toward the doors, you're not supposed to be in the building. And yet, here I am. He smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Forgotten so quickly. My keycard still works. No one questions my presence. It's almost as if nothing has changed. I reached for the door open button, but Douglas was faster, hitting the button for the parking garage and then emergency stop. The elevator jerked to a halt between floors. What are you doing? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Having a conversation, he replied calmly. One that's long overdue. I clutched my phone, my finger hovering over the emergency call button. Let me out, Douglas. After you hear what I have to say. He straightened his tie, a gesture so normal it seemed obscene in the context. You've caused quite the disruption, Vanessa. Years of carefully cultivated relationships, ruined. My reputation, damaged. My career, potentially over. You did that yourself, I said, when you chose to steal other people's work. When you decided to bully and intimidate anyone who questioned you. He laughed, the sound harsh in the confined space. Is that what you think happened? How naive. This is business, Vanessa. This is how success is built. The strong take what they need, and the weak provide it. That's the natural order. Not anymore, I said. Not here. His expression hardened. You think your little crusade will change anything? That Diana's sudden interest in ethics will last beyond the next quarterly report? That Caleb Foster won't become exactly what I was once he tastes real power? He's nothing like you. No? Douglas took a step closer. Everyone becomes me eventually. That's the secret. No one tells you. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. And what it reveals is that deep down, we all want the same thing. More. More recognition. More control. More success. Whatever the cost. I pressed myself against the elevator wall. You're wrong. Am I? Another step. Then why are you so afraid right now? Because you know I'm right. Because you know that in the end, this system can't be changed. It can only be mastered. My hand found the alarm button, and I pressed it hard. A shrill beeping filled the elevator as Douglas smiled again. Think about my words, Vanessa. When the shine wears off your new position, when you realize the game is rigged, when you finally understand that integrity is just a luxury for those who can afford it. He reached past me and released the emergency. Stop. The elevator hummed back to life. I'll be waiting. The doors opened on the ground floor, and I stumbled out, heart pounding. Douglas remained inside, his eyes locked on mine as the doors closed between us. I stood in the empty lobby, shaking, his words echoing in my mind. Was he right? Was I fighting a battle that couldn't be won? Was the system too entrenched to change? No, I refused to. Believe that. Refused to let his cynicism infect my resolve. I pulled out my phone and called security, reporting Douglas's presence in the building. Then I called Diana. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The executive committee meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp in the Cypress boardroom, a space reserved for the most consequential company decisions. I arrived 30 minutes early, arranging my presentation materials with methodical precision, each document a piece of armor for the battle ahead. Last night's confrontation with Douglas had left me shaken but resolute. I'd filed a formal report with security and spoken directly with Diana, who had been furious that Douglas had managed to access the building despite his suspension. His keycard had been immediately deactivated, and security protocols tightened throughout the building. Ms. Cole. I looked up to find Leonard Whitfield, the company's chief legal officer, standing in the doorway. At 62, Leonard was the longest-serving executive at Meridian, his silver hair and Brooks Brothers suits as much a fixture as the company logo. Mr. Whitfield, I acknowledged, continuing my preparations. You're early. As are you? He entered the room, closing the door behind him. I wanted a word before the others arrive. I straightened, instantly wary. Leonard had been conspicuously silent throughout the Douglas affair, neither supporting nor opposing the changes Diana had initiated. Of course, I said carefully. Leonard settled into a chair, smoothing his tie. I've reviewed your proposal for the new attribution system. It's comprehensive. Thank you. Perhaps too comprehensive. He tapped the document in front of him. This would fundamentally alter how we recognize and reward performance at Meridian. It would disrupt hierarchies that have existed for decades. I met his gaze steadily. That's the point. Leonard's expression remained neutral. Change of this magnitude creates instability, Ms. Cole. Uncertainty. And in our business, uncertainty is costly. So is talent loss, I countered. So is enabling people like Douglas Barrett to thrive while suppressing our best contributors. He nodded slowly. A fair point, but there are concerns among certain board members that this crusade of yours might be driven more by personal vendettas than company welfare. This isn't about Douglas, I said firmly. It's about creating a culture where what happened to Caleb, and dozens of others, can't happen again. Leonard studied me for a long moment. You truly believe this system can change, don't you? I know it can. A smile flickered across his face, so brief I almost missed it. Then you should know something. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. Douglas Barrett wasn't the first person to steal Caleb Foster's work. My breath caught. What do you mean? Leonard slid the folder across the table. Before Douglas, there was James Harrington, Caleb's first supervisor when he joined Meridian. The pattern was established then, James taking credit for Caleb's innovations, bearing his contributions, isolating him from leadership. I opened the folder to find a series of performance reviews, project reports, and email exchanges dating back to Caleb's first 6 months with the company. The evidence was clear. James had systematically erased Caleb from his own work, just as Douglas would later do. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Because James Harrington now sits on our board, Leonard replied quietly, and he's leading the resistance to your proposed changes. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. That's why you've been silent on all of this. You knew. Leonard sighed heavily. I suspected, but I had no proof until the audit of Douglas's conduct led me to review historical patterns. What I found? He gestured to the folder. Well, it wasn't just Caleb. James had a history of this behavior. So did his predecessor. So did mine. I stared at him, the implications settling like a weight on my chest. This isn't just a few bad managers. It's systematic. It's cultural, Leonard corrected, passed down from one generation of leaders to the next. Those who succeed within the system perpetuate it. Those who challenge it are pushed out, I finished. Or worse. Leonard leaned forward. Diana, Caldwell is under enormous pressure from the board to contain this situation, to limit the damage to a single bad actor, Douglas, rather than acknowledge the deeper problem. Is she going to cave? I asked bluntly. That depends. On what? On what happens in this meeting. Leonard checked his watch. The others will be here soon. Use this information wisely, Ms. Cole. Not as a weapon, but as a tool. Real change doesn't come from tearing down. It comes from building something better. Before I could respond, the door opened and Diana entered, followed by the rest of the executive committee. The atmosphere shifted immediately, charged with tension and unspoken agendas. "Good morning," Diana began, taking her seat at the head of the table. "We have a full agenda today, but our primary focus is Vanessa's proposal for a new attribution and recognition system." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Leonard's revelation pressing against my thoughts. This wasn't just about Douglas anymore. It was about a cycle that had been repeating for years, maybe decades. A system that rewarded the wrong behaviors and crushed the right ones. "Thank you, Diana," I said, rising to my feet. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to share some additional context that I believe is critical to understanding why these changes are necessary. I looked around the table, meeting each executive's gaze directly. Douglas Barrett's behavior wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a deeper cultural issue, one that predates him and extends beyond him. Murmurs rippled around the table. Diana frowned slightly, but nodded for me to continue. "I've recently discovered evidence that this pattern of credit appropriation, of erasing contributors, of rewarding the wrong behaviors, has been ongoing for years." I glanced at Leonard, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "And it extends to the highest levels of our organization." The room fell silent. I could feel the resistance building, the instinctive defense mechanisms activating around the table. "I'm not here to name names or assign blame," I continued, softening my approach. "We've all been shaped by this culture in different ways. Some of us have benefited from it, others have been harmed by it, but all of us have accepted it as just the way things are." I opened my presentation, projecting the first slide onto the screen. Behind me, not the policy details I'd planned to start with, but instead a simple question. What kind of company do we want to be? "We have an opportunity here," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Not just to punish one person who got caught, but to break a cycle that has cost us talent, innovation, and integrity for far too long. The question isn't whether we can afford to change. It's whether we can afford not to." For the next hour, I laid out my vision, not just for new policies, but for a transformed culture. One where contribution was transparent, where credit was shared, where speaking up was valued rather than punished. I showed them the data. Companies with ethical cultures outperformed their peers by an average of 40% over a 10-year period. Talent retention improved. Innovation accelerated. When I finished, the room was quiet, but it wasn't the hostile silence I had feared. It was thoughtful, contemplative. Diana spoke first. "Thank you, Vanessa. This is more comprehensive than I anticipated." "It needs to be," I replied simply. She nodded, then turned to the group. "Comments? Questions?" What followed was the most honest conversation I'd witnessed in my decade at Meridian. Executives admitted to behaviors they weren't proud of. Others spoke of times they'd been silenced or sidelined. The veneer of corporate perfection cracked, revealing the human complexities beneath. And when the vote came, it wasn't even close. My proposal passed unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, Leonard caught my eye across the table and offered a small, approving nod. The first battle was won, but the war for Meridian's soul was just beginning. 6 months passed in a blur of policy implementation, training sessions, and cultural interventions. The resistance hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved from active sabotage to passive skepticism, which I considered progress. Small victories accumulated, a new performance review system that valued collaboration as highly as individual achievement, a mentorship program that paired senior leaders with emerging talent, a transparent project tracking system that acknowledged every contributor, from administrative assistants to executive directors. Douglas Barrett was formally terminated following the completion of the audit, which had uncovered not just ethical violations but financial improprieties that bordered on fraud. The messages stopped, the threats vanished, life at Meridian settled into a new normal. On a crisp autumn evening, Diana hosted a small gathering at her home in Pacific Heights. Not a formal company function, but a private celebration of the progress we'd made. The guest list was selective: those who had championed the changes, those who had implemented them, those who had believed when belief was difficult. Caleb and I arrived together, having developed a friendship that had deepened over months of shared struggle and purpose. He'd flourished in his role as associate director, his natural talents finally given room to grow. The team that had once ignored him now looked to him for guidance and inspiration. Diana's home reflected her personality, elegant but Understated, valuable, but not ostentatious. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm light across the gathered guests. Outside, the lights of San Francisco twinkled beneath a clear night sky. Quite a view, Caleb remarked as we stood on the terrace, champagne flutes in hand. Worth the climb, I agreed, thinking of the steep hills we'd navigated to reach her neighborhood. I wasn't talking about the city. He smiled. I meant looking back at how far we've come. I returned his smile. It's been quite a journey. All because you said 5 words at exactly the right moment. The memory of that night, the crystal chandeliers, the shocked silence, Diana's recognition of Caleb, felt both recent and distant, as if it had happened in another lifetime. I've been meaning to ask, I said, turning to face him fully. How did Diana know who you were? That night at the gala? She recognized your name immediately. Caleb's expression turned reflective. My father was her mentor when she first started in finance. He wrote her recommendation letter for business school, helped her land her first job at Morgan Stanley. Why didn't you ever use that connection? In all those months, Douglas was sidelining you. You could have reached out to her directly. Caleb shrugged. My father always taught me that true merit shouldn't need family connections, that the work should speak for itself. He glanced at me. Similar to your philosophy, actually. We were both wrong, I said softly. The work doesn't speak for itself. People speak for it, or silence it. Systems amplify some, voices and muffle others. And now? Now we're building a system where the right voices can be heard. From inside, Diana called for everyone's attention. We rejoined the group as she raised her glass. 6 months ago, she began, Meridian was at a crossroads. We could have chosen the easy path, containing the damage, replacing one bad actor, and continuing with business as usual. Instead, thanks largely to Vanessa's courage and persistence, we chose the harder path of genuine transformation. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The results speak for themselves, Diana continued. Employee satisfaction up 28%. Talent retention improved by 35%. And our quarterly performance, which many feared would suffer during this transition, exceeding projections by 12%. She turned to me. Vanessa, when you stood in that ballroom 6 months ago and said those 5 words, you have no idea who you're humiliating. You weren't just defending Caleb. You were challenging all of us to be better, to see what we had been blind to change what we had accepted. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fireplace, a pride in what we had accomplished together. There's one more announcement I'd like to make, Diana said, her expression turning serious. As you know, Leonard Whitfield will be retiring at the end of this year after 30 years with Meridian. Leonard raised his glass in acknowledgement, smiling at the gentle applause. After careful consideration, Diana continued, I've decided that his replacement as Chief Ethics Officer will be Vanessa Cole. The room erupted in genuine applause as I stood frozen in shock. Chief Ethics Officer was an executive-level position, a seat at the table where the most consequential decisions were made. I don't know what to say, I managed when the applause died down. Say yes, Diana replied simply. Later, as the gathering wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself alone with Leonard on the terrace, both of us taking a final moment to appreciate the view before heading home. Congratulations, he said. The position suits you. I have big shoes to fill, I replied honestly. Leonard chuckled. My shoes are old and worn out. Yours will take Meridian places I never could. He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. You know, in all my years here, I never had the courage to do what you did, to stand up and say enough. I made small changes where I could, protected who I could, but I never challenged the fundamental problems. You helped me when it mattered, I reminded him. You could have joined the resistance. Instead, you gave me the information I needed. Too little, too late, he said with a sad smile. But, that's the past. The future is yours now. He raised his glass. To speaking up, to being heard, I responded, echoing the toast Caleb and I had shared months ago. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. One moment of courage, 5 words spoken when it would have been easier to remain silent. A choice to stand beside someone who had been wronged, rather, than watching from the sidelines. The next morning, I arrived early at the office, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. Coffee waiting on your desk. Meeting at 10 to discuss the mentorship expansion. Proud of you, Chief Ethics Officer? I smiled, typing back a quick thank you. As I rode the elevator to the 45th floor, I thought about Douglas's parting words to me in this very space months ago. Integrity is just a luxury for those who can afford it. He'd been wrong. Integrity wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Without it, success was hollow, achievement meaningless. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the transformed space of Meridian Equity. Partners. People greeted me with genuine smiles, with respect earned through action rather than authority. The culture wasn't perfect yet. No culture ever is. But it was improving every day, one decision at a time. I passed the wall where our new company values hung, prominently displayed for all to see. The first one read, "Speak truth, especially when it's difficult." 6 simple words that had become our North Star. Not so different from the 5 that had started it all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk back into the room with someone no one else believed in, and refuse to let them stand alone. That was what I'd done for Caleb that night, what he'd later done for me, what we were now doing for every person at Meridian who deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. 5 words had changed everything. But it was what came after those words. The hard work, the perseverance, the unwavering commitment to building something better that truly mattered. As I settled into my office to begin another day of that work, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was where I belonged. This was what I was meant to do. And I was just getting started.